a state of heat, death. No mechanical energy, nothing should be functioning. But we are functioning, that means long enough time has not passed. If long enough time has not passed, that means the universe is finite. If it's finite, it began to exist. Anything that begins to exist needs the beginner, and the beginner of the universe is none other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Understood? Okay, question. What causes heat death? Total entropy, total disorder, expiration of the mechanical energy. Alright? You could go home and Google heat death of the universe and you will find a fuller explanation, right, for that. Yes, brother. Somebody who raised the hand up there. Yes.
I was going to add just a small thing to what you just said here. Most of the scientists believe in a beginning to the universe via the Big Bang theory, which is a singularity before which there was absolutely nothing. And this is something they could prove mathematically with equations. So in many ways, the atheists who have sort of biological background may not be very eloquent as to explain how this came to be, but some others could be, and they could, like present argument in that regard. So this is not to sound like an atheist, but just to give you, this is how they play around these scientific concepts a little bit.
Right, so the brother is very much true that this physical argument about the finite nature of the universe could also be proved by mathematicians. And obviously they say that the universe, it began about 16 billion years ago. Initially there was a primordial mass and there was a big explosion, and from that primordial mass you have all the planets, the galaxies, the sun, the moon, everything was formed. What does the Quran say, by the way? Quran says in Surah number 21, Surah Anbiya, ayah number 30, the translation is, do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth, they were joined together in one primordial mass, and it is Allah who set it asunder. The Quran says that. And now, in this actually last century, they have proven this very important beginning of the universe. Science says that, alhamdulillah, Quran even before them, 1400 years ago, already proven that fact in the book. Quran, yes. How long will it take for the heat death to happen? They don't know the exact time frame, but we don't have to worry. Most likely we won't be there. The sun would be out most likely, according to the scientists, maybe 20 billion years ago from now. After that, some other bigger stars. So it could be a few billion years from now, right? But eventually, that's the state of the matters. Order to disorder and heat death. Anyone else question before we move on, inshallah, to the next way to explain to our atheist friends? Okay, let's move on, inshallah. By the way, these arguments which I am presenting over here, we could provide a soft copy of all of these so you could have as a reference. Because I'm just skipping some of the slides, I'm just going to the point because of the shortness of time, inshallah. I'll give the copy to Brother Samir, and he is displaying the sign that we have 15 minutes before we take Q&A. Is that true? Okay, fine. I'll just present to you one more argument, then we will go towards really quickly evolution. Okay? Very quickly evolution, inshallah. As I came into the masjid, there were only like maybe 2 or 3 individuals over here when I came in the masjid. When I came here, I found out that somebody already placed the mic in the right place. The stand was in the right place. The temperature was nicely set to maybe 72 degrees or so. The lights were on. The carpet was nicely vacuumed. So the place was set so we could pray over here and we could have a presentation over here. Right? So somebody turned on the lights like the brother did right now. So when I came here inside the masjid, I knew that it was somebody who did that, an intelligent person, a person who cares about all of us, who did that. In the same way, my dear Muslims, there are many, many factors in the universe and on earth that are so much fine-tuned so life could exist on earth. Very important. And some of those factors are very, very easy for us to know. The distance between the earth and the sun is precisely set by somebody. If it were closer, it would be too hot for the earth. Life as we know is not going to exist. If it is a little bit further away, it's going to be too cold. Again, life is not going to exist as we know of. The amount of oxygen, right? Like a quiz question now, just to see if everyone is awake. What is the percentage of oxygen in the air that we breathe, by the way? How much? 21. Okay, about 21%. Okay, you're right. And the majority of the rest of the gas is which one? Nitrogen. Alhamdulillah, right. So if there were more oxygen, it's going to be poisonous for us. Less oxygen, again, it's not going to be, we won't be able to survive. So somebody fine-tuned the percentage of oxygen in the air so we could survive. The amount of gravity is 9.8 units. If it were lesser than that, we may be flying off, right? If it were greater, we may be crushed in our own weight. So there are so many factors, not just on earth, but in the rest of the universe, so life on earth could exist. If somebody fine-tuned this masjid, so we could have a very, harmonious praying and the presentation, who was that entity who fine-tuned the universe and fine-tuned the earth? That entity, we say, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is also a very simple argument, inshallah, that we could use for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How much time, brother Samir? Okay, alhamdulillah. So let's quickly examine the theory of evolution, right? This is a very big stumbling block for some of us because it is presented in our textbooks in schools and colleges, maybe on the internet, maybe by the professors which are out there as a fact of evolution. Now, for evolution to be true, three things have to happen. Let's take a look at the picture up there. Is that guy on the Facebook? Right? Looks like it, right? Spending hours and hours. Now, for evolution to be true, three things have to happen. Number one, the first initial cell has to come about by itself. And we have already strike number one. Strike number two would be, from the very first cell, it should evolve into many transitional forms. So species should change from one species to the next species. And the third thing would be that human beings, who we are, we should have evolved from a lower species to a higher species. So we have already dealt with the very first item in evolution. That means the very first cell was formed by itself, and we have disproven it. So let's come to the second one, inshallah. According to Darwin, he mentioned that if anyone who could prove that a species does not have a pre-species to it, that means my theory would be void. Very important. A bird, according to Darwin, has pre-bird forms, lower species form. But according to him, if anyone could prove that a bird or any animal does not have a pre-species, his theory is null and void. So, alhamdulillah, scientists, what they have found is that there are many species, or almost all the species, about 500 million years ago, which is called as the Cambrian explosion. Just like in the physics, you have the Big Bang explosion. In biology, there is called as the Cambrian explosion. In that Cambrian explosion, they have found out, the scientists, that many species, many phyla, they all came about to be in a full-formed in a fully formed bodies without any precursors. The spider does not have a pre-spider form. Many of the fishes, they don't have a pre-fish form. The ants, they don't have a pre-ant form. So that itself is a major blow to Darwin and the current evolutionary scientists. So this is what Darwin says, by the way. Even though it's a long statement, it's a very, very important statement. So he says, the abrupt manner in which the whole group of species suddenly appeared in certain formation has been urged by several paleontologists. For instance, these scientists as a fatal objection to the belief in the transmutation of species. If numerous species belonging to the same genera or families have really started into life at once, the fact would be a fatal to the theory of evolution through natural selection. So Darwin is saying that it is a fatal blow if we could find that the species came about without having a precursor. It is going to be a fatal blow for evolution. And it is a fatal blow because they have found out that there are many species like that. Richard Dawkins, who is the most famous atheist in the world from Oxford, this is what he has to say. And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution. The very first time they appeared, it is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history. Needless to say, this appearance of sudden planting has delighted many creations. Look at this. Darwin, who is the father of evolution, is saying that, and Richard Dawkins, who is the most famous evolutionist in our time, is saying the same thing. Sudden appearance is a fatal blow to evolution. And that's what they have found when they have dug up fossil after fossil after fossil. And I will end with this, inshallah. The second thing that they say is that there should be transition forms between one species to the second species. For example, you have species number A over here. For species number A to become species number B, which is here, there has to be many steps, right? From species number A, many other species have to form the transitional forms until species number B is formed. So there should be more transitional forms than the final form of species number B. So there should be many transitional species. So far they have dug up close to 100 million, look at the number, 100 million fossils. And they have not found a single transitionary form. Even though there should be millions and billions of them, zero so far. You know, when you present this argument to an evolutionist, they will say, you know, give us more time. Eventually they will find it, right? 100 million of them with zero transitionary form between them. So these are some of the things, my dear Muslims, that we could use. Existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using the 4 or 5 arguments and blow to the theory of evolution. Last but not the least, then we could mention to them, once they agree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, then the question they will ask is, of all the faiths in the world, how do we know that Islam is true? It could be Christianity, it could be Judaism, it could be Hinduism, Shintoism, many isms out there. So for that, now we have to prove it to them that Islam is true by using the Quran as being the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll just mention the points without going into details. Point number 1, in surah number 32, ayah number 2, it says that it is the kalam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Point number 2 we could use is all the challenges that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in the Quran. Surah 17, ayah number 88. If all of the mankind and all the jinns could come together to produce the likeness of the Quran, they would never be able to do it. Even if they could come together for help and support. That was the challenge. Then the challenge was reduced to producing one surah like the Quranic surah. Surah Baqarah, ayah number 23, that's where the challenge is. The third point we could use for the authenticity of the Quran and Islam is that the Quran was preserved without any change. Surah 15, ayah number 9. I don't have time to go over the verses, the translation in the Arabic. Point number 4, Surah Nisa, Surah number 4, ayah number 82, it says, if this Quran was not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we would have found many inconsistencies in it. Not a single contradiction. Point number 5 we could use is that the comprehensive nature of the guidance of the Quran itself. Point number 6, last but not the least, is the scientific facts in the Quran. There are 6,000 plus verses in the Quran, 500 of them plus they deal with the modern scientific facts without any error. A book with that nature could not have been produced by any human being or any Arab or anyone for that matter with zero errors and 100% of them coming true, proven by our modern day scientists. So these are the two approaches that I have used and you could use inshallah to prove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala using their own sciences and to prove the truth of Islam by providing them evidences for the authenticity of the Quran inshallah. Alhamdulillah. So that is the alhamdulillah some of the points that I had to share with all of you. Questions and comments. Yes, brother, go ahead.
I have a lot of questions.
Okay, let's switch brother, then sister, then brother, and we could have many more individuals compared to just one person asking many questions. Sounds fair?
Fair enough.
Alhamdulillah, go for it.
They're all interrelated.
Okay, go for it.
Just to clarify.
Yeah, question first one.
Number one, we as Muslims, where does it say that we shouldn't believe in evolution? I don't see any contradiction with the theory itself in Islam as a belief, besides some of the tenuous arguments provided or presented by some of the scientists. This is number one. Number two, you listed a few things, and I think, and I'm not really 100% certain about this, is there was a lot of new findings that seem to support some of what the theory of evolution had presented. One of them is you've touched upon the presence of transitional states in some of the species. There are some paleontologists and archaeologists who have dug up, especially in the dinosaur era, some of the species they might rank as transition, especially the transition from ocean to walking on Earth to flying later. And the third, I think, in sort of most crucial, I guess, part, and this is where we need to do a bit more reconciliation, is some of the experiments that scientists have conducted, especially when you mentioned the primordial soup. Some of the scientists actually were able to recreate some of the amino acids. And this is really what they think of, at least in our knowledge and what our understanding of science. This is what they consider to be the brick that sort of is behind life, and not necessarily the cell itself. And finally, the idea of random or randomization is what drives all of this evolution and some of the atheist ideas. And it's really, really hard to address. So I think it brings me back full circle to the first question, and that is, why is it contradictory to us as Muslims who believe in science and the unseen to find it unacceptable to accept that as a theory, especially one considers some of the things that are presented by scientists. An example is like, the skulls of a human being, from 2, 3, 4, and 5 million years ago.
Sure, let me take your the last question first, inshallah, right? So, yeah, inshallah. So the brother has mentioned many good points. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm going to address all of them, but at least take the last point first, inshallah. Now, you have mentioned that they have done some experiments and they have produced amino acids. Yes, I know about the experiment, by the way. It was in 1954, done by Urey and Miller. So in their experiment, in the lab, they have produced, or they wanted to produce the primordial environment, and they had all the lightnings and the sparks in there, and they found amino acids in there, right? Now, it's very important. In 1995, and you could confirm this, in 1995, modern day scientists, they have shown, it is in the Earth Journal, by the way, they have shown that that experiment was flawed. Very important. That experiment was flawed. They have used wrong gases in the wrong percentage, and that's what they got. But if you include the right gases with the right percentage, you're not going to produce amino acids. So they wanted to replicate the experiment again with the right gases, the right percentage, the right sparks, the right time. Nobody has replicated that as of right now today, by the way. It's very important. Now, Islam does believe in evolution. Microevolution, not macroevolution, by the way. Very important. So microevolution means like anyone who has like a lighter skin, if you go too close to the equator and start living up there, you will adapt. Your body is going to adapt and you'll get a tan. There's slight change within you, that's adaptation. But you're not going to become into a different species. So we believe in microevolution, but not the macroevolution. That means you are transforming from one species and becoming totally a different species. Scientifically, that has not been proven as of yet. That's very, very important. So for those reasons, not because I'm saying that, but because there are scientific evidence for what I'm saying. In the modern journals, in the experiment, in the refutation, in the current magazines, they have the refutation to some of the arguments our atheist friends that they will present to us. But we could discuss more, inshallah. After, I would like to give more opportunities to some other brothers or sisters. The turn for the sisters, if you have any questions or comments based on what we have mentioned, inshallah. Remember, some of you are going to schools and colleges, so it's very, very important that you arm yourself with knowledge using their sciences to converse with them and to share the message of Islam with them, inshallah. Any question, comments from you? Okay, brother Stern. Yes, brother, go ahead.
There was this book written by a German author, Sir Emil Kant, in 1700s. He basically wrote a book first about, I don't remember the title of it, but basically it was the evidence of God. So what he tried to prove initially was that there is no evidence of God. So he presented that if you look into the history of how people have dealt with this major question of whether God exists or not, there have been several arguments presented. One of those arguments is cosmological argument, the second argument is historical argument. And then there are many other arguments. And at the end of that, he used to say that, you can always answer a question with another question. And so there is really no concrete basis or concrete evidence for or against the question that whether there is God.
Okay,
So that is, and then he kind of was pressured by the church, so he wrote another book, and he said, there's the ethics of the human nature and stuff like that. That's his own.
Alhamdulillah. So Dr. Uwais is kind of just making a comment that in the 1700s there's a philosopher called Immanuel Kant, and he kind of wrote that there is no solid argument for either for or against the existence of God or higher power. Perhaps in the 1700s there may not have been that many, but using the current modern scientific data and the scientific fields, especially the information within the cell, at that time they did not have that information, by the way. Now we do. So the sciences of our time, the paleontology, the biochemistry, the biology and the physics and the second law of thermodynamics, which were not there at that time, now we have access to them, and now they are pointing towards a higher power. So that was